and welcome along to Glasgow Science Centre for our Curious About live sessions. My name is Abby and our guest for this session is Rosie Hull, who is a Senior Business Development Associate at Skyrora. Today, Rosie will be talking to us about Skyrora, space in Scotland, and there will be plenty of time for Rosie to answer any questions that you might have. So please write them in the chat box on YouTube at any point during this session, and we'll have some time at the end to see what questions we can have answered. But without further ado, welcome to Rosie. Hi, Rosie.
Hi, thanks so much for the introduction. Really appreciate it. Yeah, so today, just like Abby said, I just wanted to chat to you all about what the space industry looks like in Scotland and in the UK. Just maybe giving a little bit of background about myself as well. So I actually work on the business development team at Skyrora. So I'm not actually the one building rockets, but I'm more the sort of person that is selling rockets and talking to customers and clients and working with other space companies as well in Scotland. So yeah, let's get into it. So in Scotland, you might not realise it, but there are actually around 200 space businesses in Scotland alone. And so, what I want to do today is focus on the companies that are involved in the space industry in Scotland, as all of these businesses are helping us to actually get satellites into space. But I guess just in case some of you don't know what a satellite is, I just wanted to give a little bit of background on that. So as you can see from this video on the slide here, we have the Earth in the middle and we have some objects circling around the Earth in space. And the path that this object is following is called an orbit. So what satellites do is they orbit around planets or the Earth, and they can either be natural or man-made. So for the Earth, the Moon is a natural satellite as it circles and orbits the Earth. And then what you can see in this video specifically is a man-made satellite, which is kind of like a robot that humans have made, and they then put it into space so that it can circle the Earth and do different things. So the focus today is going to be on how we make satellites and get them to space in Scotland. So what you can see in this picture here is a close-up of a man-made satellite. So satellites can actually be quite a range of sizes. So some can be as big as a bus, whereas some might even be as small as a school bag. And the satellites that you're looking at in this picture are actually as small as a school bag. So they're very, very, very small. But you might also be asking, how do you make a satellite and how do you actually get a satellite to space? So there's 4 main steps involved in getting a satellite to space, but the first step is that you have to build the satellite. So satellites are made up of different parts, kind of similar to our phones that we might be using every day. So for example, satellites typically have cameras in them, like our phones, a power source or battery, and also a device that allows them to communicate with the Earth. So again, similar to how we communicate with each other on our phones. And each satellite will have a different design depending on what we want to do with it. So for example, you might want a satellite to look at the clouds in the sky, at the oceans, or even a satellite that looks at the sun. And again, we need to make each satellite differently depending on what its purpose is. So in Scotland, there are a large number of companies that are actually making satellites just like these ones. So companies like Spire and Clydespace. And what I wanted to do today was go through the steps of getting a satellite to space, but taking a very specific scenario. So we're going to focus on a scenario where we are building a satellite that is going to take photos of the clouds above the UK. And so to do this, to make a satellite that's focused on taking pictures of clouds, we first need to build that satellite. And if we were building a satellite like this, the main focus would be that it needs to have a camera that allows us to take photos of clouds. Then, of course, we'd want to put maybe a battery in to power the satellite and a communications device, like I mentioned before. So once we've built our satellite, the next step is launching it to space. So sort of similar to what you can see in this video, a rocket releases the satellite into orbit around the Earth. So orbit being that path around the Earth that I mentioned earlier. However, something that we don't have in Scotland or in the UK are rockets. And most satellite manufacturers have to send their satellites the whole way to America just to launch their satellite to space. And this costs quite a lot of money and takes quite a lot of time. But yeah, so once your satellite is in space, you then need to communicate with the satellite from Earth. So you need to communicate with it so that you can tell it what to do while it's in space, and also maybe when to take photos or to do other things. So if we think about the scenario that I mentioned earlier, where we want to take photos of the clouds above the UK, we need to be able to tell the satellite when to take a photo. So how do we do this? So what we use is a satellite dish, similar to what you can see in this photo here. So some of you might have a small satellite dish at home that gives you more channels on your TV, for example, maybe if you have Sky TV. So how that works is kind of similar to how these much larger satellite dishes work that you can see in this photo here, except obviously the one you have at home will be much, much smaller. And what this satellite dish is doing is it's collecting information from a satellite in space and allowing us to communicate with that satellite. So using this communication device on the satellite that I mentioned earlier, we're able to send information back down to Earth, and we can then tell the satellite when we want it to take photos. So you might also not even realize that we have a bunch of these large satellite dishes in Dundee in Scotland, and these are talking to satellites every single day. And so the final step after manufacturing your satellite, launching it, and then communicating with it, you have to then understand the satellite data that you've obtained. So in our scenario, we've taken some photos of the clouds above the UK, and the last step is to look at these photos that our satellite has taken and to help us understand what we are even looking at. So if we have photos of clouds back on Earth, what do we want to do with it? And what else can we do with that information about clouds? Well, what we can do is we can use the information to analyze what kinds of weather we're having in the UK. And this is what companies like the Met Office do. They use satellite pictures of clouds to help us tell when it's going to rain or when a storm's going to come. And so, yeah, in the UK and Scotland, again, we have a large number of companies that are working towards analysing satellite data as well. So what I've just explained briefly is the main steps you must take to get a satellite into space. So obviously step 1, manufacture the satellite. Step 2 is to launch the satellite to space. Step 3 is to connect with the satellite. And then step 4 is to use the satellite data appropriately. And in Scotland, like I mentioned, we have companies doing all of these steps except launching the satellite to space. Without rockets in the UK, we have to send satellites really far away to America. And so this is why we decided to start Skyrora in Scotland, so that we can build our own rockets that the UK can use. So focusing in a bit more about what we're actually doing at Skyrora specifically. So what you can see here in this picture in the background is an image of our Skyrora XL, which is our first main rocket. And this is a suborbital rocket. So at Skyrora, what we have done is we first started by building very, very small rockets. We do this so that we can test our technology on a much smaller scale, and then we start moving on to bigger rockets. So the Skyrora XL that you can see in this picture is one of our smaller rockets that we use to test our technology. Since I mentioned that it is a suborbital vehicle, this means that the rocket goes to space for a few minutes and then it does come back down to Earth, but it doesn't take any satellites to space using this rocket. So if maybe we could just show that video, Richie, that'd be really helpful. Cool, thanks so much for that. Yeah, so what you could see from that video was our first ever rocket launch attempt of our Skyrora XL vehicle. So we did this launch attempt from Iceland in a really remote place on the north coast. And yeah, typically, whenever you start a rocket company, things don't always go perfectly from the get go. And this means that you're going to have a few launch attempts where the rocket might go up, but it might not quite get to space. And that was what happened for us here. As you can see from the video, the rocket doesn't go very far. But what we did do was we tested our technology and we managed to get the rocket to go up. And as you'll see from a lot of other rocket companies, this is already a really amazing thing. And yeah, we're just thankful that the rocket did actually take flight. So that's our first test vehicle, the Skylark L. But then we have another video of our main vehicle, which is a vehicle that's going to be taking small satellites to space. If you could just show that video, Richie, thank you. Awesome, thanks so much. So yeah, that video was kind of a demonstration of what our Skyrora XL rocket is going to look like. So this rocket is going to fill that gap that I was mentioning in Scotland because it's going to be launching small satellites to space. And this will mean that in Scotland, we'll be doing every part of the supply chain. So we'll be manufacturing, we'll be launching satellites, we will be communicating with them and also analysing satellite data. And this means the UK and Scotland will be able to do all of this by themselves. So this is just quite a whistle-stop tour about the space industry in Scotland. But what I do want to say really quickly is that the space industry isn't just for engineers and scientists. I know quite a few of you are quite young and probably thinking about what you want to do in the future. And I really want you to, if you're interested, think about getting into the space sector because it's really quite an open industry for a lot of different types of people. So we're also going to be looking for business people like myself, lawyers, and people in charge of health and safety, HR, security. There is so many different job roles in the sector, and there's already so many companies around, and who knows how many more space companies there will be in the future. So yeah, definitely think about that. Yeah, so thanks so much. I'll just hand back to Abby.
Thank you so much, Rosie. That was a really interesting presentation all about your rockets. So now we are going to jump into some questions. So I'm looking to the first question. So first question is, does the weather in Scotland affect the ability to launch rockets, and why might Scotland be a good place to launch rockets from?
Yeah, of course. So the weather probably does have an effect. So whenever you're launching rockets, you can't launch whenever the winds are quite high. And we're planning to launch from the Shetland Islands, which is quite northerly. But to be honest, we did do some analysis, and thankfully, most of the year it's actually good conditions for launching rockets. So that's quite good. And the reason that we're launching from the UK is because typically satellites want to go to very specific orbits, and you can get to those orbits really easily from the Shetland Islands. And so that was our biggest reason.
Excellent. That's really interesting. We'll get our next question up on the screen. So what drew you to working in Scotland's space industry and in particular with Skyrora?
Yeah. So I'll give an honest answer to this. So I did a degree in geology with planetary science at Manchester University, and I really enjoyed it. I loved learning about the solar system and things like that. But actually, I didn't really know that there were rocket companies in the UK either. And so what I did was I was just applying for companies in the space industry, and then after a few interviews, I got this job, and I'm quite thankful because yeah, I've just come to realize that there really is a lot going on, and so that's why a big part of my job is trying to tell people that there are a lot of space companies here.
Excellent. So it's just something that appeared in your radar. You didn't even know. So it's a really
Yeah.
interesting job. Let's see what our next question is. So, is there someone in the space industry who inspires you?
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. I would probably say right now, my manager, Derek Harris, he's the head of business operations. He does definitely inspire me, and I'm not just saying this because I work for him. He, yeah, he's kind of shown me what it means to be like a genuine manager that actually like cares about the people that work for him, and also sort of cares about making sure that we actually develop ourselves and our career. And I think that's a really good role model for me because this is my first job after uni. So it's good to see what I should be aspiring to, if you get me.
Excellent. It's so important to have a good role model when you're developing like early career and moving forward from there. So that's really great to hear.
Yes.
Let's see what our next question is. So you mentioned you have a background in geology and with planetary science. Does that help you in your current role?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. I would say a big part of my job is also understanding the more technical side of launching rockets and, about satellite orbits and things like that. And so I think my degree gave me a good background in that kind of knowledge. So it was very helpful, I think.
Excellent. Is there anything like tricky about your current role that you think that you didn't get that background information for, something you've had to learn on the job sort of thing?
Yeah,
A
definitely.
lot.
Because this job is more business orientated, I didn't really
Mhm.
have much knowledge about how businesses work and things like that. But I was definitely able to like learn on the job as such, and
Mhm.
I do understand, so that's good.
Excellent. Good to hear. Let's see what our next question is. So, what has been your biggest challenge working with Skyrora?
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. I guess my biggest challenge has probably been just again learning all the things about businesses that I didn't understand. So kind of similar to what I just said. Yeah,
Mhm.
there was quite a large learning curve with that, but I got through it, so I'm glad for that.
Excellent. So let's jump on to our next question. So, what has been your biggest success? So, the flip side of that, what is the most success you have experienced while working at Skyrora?
Yeah, so I actually got the chance to be there at our Skylark L launch attempt in Iceland, and that was probably my own personal biggest success because I got to be there for a rocket launch attempt and sort of see everything that went into it. And yeah, although we didn't get the rocket to space, like we still did a really good job, and so that was definitely my biggest highlight.
That's great. It's like you learn a lot from failure as well, so
Mm,
it's always a good experience.
exactly.
Um, so let's see what our next question is. So, what type of opportunities are there at Skyrora for people who are interested in working in the space industry?
Yeah, so at Skyrora, there's loads of different opportunities. So, kind of what I mentioned before. So, obviously, we have quite a big business development team. So, again, that's working in like sales and networking and collaboration, things like that. And then we have a wide range of engineers. So, we have a design team who help us design like different parts of the rocket. And then
Mhm.
we also have a manufacturing team that actually manufacture the rocket, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
We also have HR, health and safety, security, basically whatever job you can think of, we probably have it.
That's really good to hear because sometimes, like you said before, you think you have to be an engineer, you have to have particular skills to work in this industry. But really, if you want to work for a cool technology company, they are looking for other skills as well in different jobs. So that's really great to hear.
Exactly.
Let's have a look for our next question. So, live question from Tara. What is the most surprising thing you've learned about space and rockets? That
That's a
question.
really good question. Oh, okay. So One of the things I learned in my degree was that there's a moon, I think it's one of Saturn's or Jupiter's moons called Titan, can't remember which one it is, and it rains oil there.
Oh my gosh, okay.
Water and rain, it rains oil and it has lakes of oil, and I just find that quite interesting.
That's crazy. I'm assuming it's a different kind of oil than we're used to on Earth, like fossil fuel oil.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think, I think it's methane and ethane, so I think it is
Okay.
technically fossil fuel oil.
Excellent. Okay.
Not how that happens though.
It's so interesting. There's such weird environments on other planets that you wouldn't know, and we're still kind of exploring the far reaches of our solar system. So that's a really interesting fact about space. Let's see if we have another question. So, what do you think are the key skills that people need to work in the space industry?
Yeah, so I guess since the space industry is quite a new industry, I would say you would have to be quite good at like adapting and showing that you can like adapt to quite a quickly changing environment because yeah, I would say that smaller companies move quite quickly compared to much bigger companies, and the space industry is filled with quite smaller companies. But yeah, in general, like just like it depends what role you want to go into, but for, a business role, just sort of skills and like just writing reports and also being able to speak with people and communicate with people well, and just like basic skills like that are really useful.
Excellent. That's really useful to hear. I'm sure there's people watching at home who are looking to work in this industry, so it's good to know what kind of skills they need to get into a role. So we have time for one more question we'll have, and then we'll wrap up this session. So for anyone watching today, if they're interested in working in the Scottish space industry, what kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, so I would definitely say, like, if you're thinking about going into uni, definitely try and do a degree that's kind of relevant to what kind of job you might want in the space industry. Um, there's a lot of rocketry societies in many of the universities across the UK, and these are really good societies because they're just sort of training people to launch really, really small, like 1 meter rockets. But if you wanted to work in the rocket industry, for example, or the satellite industry, that'd be a really good sort of society to get involved in because it gives you a lot of sort of knowledge and experience in how satellites and rockets work. And of course, as well, if anyone wanted some like more specific advice, they are free to email me as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rosie. It's been really interesting hearing your presentation today and all about the job that you do and how to get into the space industry. So thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
So thank you also to our audience for tuning in today. I hope you found it really interesting and lots of good questions that we had. If you would like to find out more about Curious About, you can head over to our Curious About website at curiousabout.glasgowsciencecentre.org, and there's lots of interesting content about innovation. All our live events are also going to be recorded and will be available for you to play back at a later date on our website. So we would also, one thing before we go off today, is we'd love to hear your thoughts on this session today. So there is going to be an online survey dropped into the chat. So we'd really appreciate it if you took a bit of time to share your thoughts with us. That is all from us today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you later. Goodbye.